All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to this Lysol Pro Solutions virtual roundtable in partnership with ISSA. I'm Julian Abuba, a director at Manifest, one of Reckitt's agency partners. The theme and topic of today's roundtable is the future of office hygiene. So, as you know, after 2 years of remote and hybrid working, many Americans are eager to return to the office. And the reopening of communal spaces is one of the most sort of hotly debated topics at the moment. Businesses around the country are concerned about restoring confidence. There's heightened concern amongst employees over the spread of illness-causing germs. And according to a recent Reckitt Lysol Pro Solutions survey conducted by Susie, only 32% of employees actually rate their company's health and safety measures as excellent. So to facilitate a successful and sustainable return to the office, companies can look to targeted hygiene protocols like those implemented at the COP26 conference in Glasgow, Scotland in November last year. So you all know COP26 was one of the largest in-person events to be held since the beginning of the pandemic. And as the official hygiene partner, Reckitt's Pro Solutions team of virologists, microbiologists, and medical scientists worked with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine to develop a custom targeted hygiene program using Dettol, just Lysol's sister brand of the UK. Dettol's own product from which learnings can be replicated in the office environment. So here with me today are three great panelists who can provide insights on the hygiene protocols at COP26 and the learnings that businesses should and can use to implement in a post-pandemic, a post-COVID world. I've got with me Dr. Lisa Ackley, Director of Medical and Scientific Engagement Hygiene at Reckitt's Lysol Pro Solutions. Lisa's worked, has a background in local and central government and academia and private sector strategic consulting. She's passionate about developing practical, easy to follow messaging to help promote public health. She's also a trustee and vice chair at the charity IFH, which is the International Scientific Forum on Home Hygiene, it's a long one, which provides scientific advice on home and everyday life, and a trustee at the Royal Society of Public Health. We also have with me Susan Barnes, head of the COVID-19 adaptations team for the COP26 unit of the Government Cabinet Office. So she recently designed and implemented the COVID-19 adaptation measures at COP26 in Glasgow, and Susan previously worked on the UK's COVID-19 social care response at the Department of Health and Social Care. So she's had a busy few years. And last but not least, we have Stuart Bainbridge, R&D Director, New Growth Platforms at Reckitt. Stuart is head of Global Business Solutions R&D team and a member of the Reckitt Global Business Solutions leadership team, heading research teams based in both the USA and the UK. And in this role, Stuart is responsible for leading new product development, innovation strategy, and delivering best-in-class solutions and science for Reckitt's partners. And Stuart was the lead Reckitt R&D lead for the COP26 project, and coordinated with the creation and execution of hygiene protocols and sustainable project selection. So just some housekeeping before we start. You should see a chat, a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. As the roundtable goes on, as the conversation flows and you have any pressing questions, please leave your questions in there. We're going to leave around 10 minutes, so we'll have a discussion of about 15 minutes. We'll leave about 10 at the end for your questions. So please do leave your questions for the panel. Where possible, please indicate who you would like you'd like to answer your questions. Be specific if you can. And yeah, we'll try and cover these. But before I kick off with questions, with the discussion, I'm going to show a quick summary video of Reckitt's work at COP26. So hopefully we've tested this, it should work, and you should be able to hear it. So I'm going to do that. Okay.
With over 30,000 attendees, 200 nationalities, 120 world leaders on a mission to protect the planet, COP26 is serious business. Like many businesses around the world, they trusted Reckitt, the makers of Lysol, to deliver their program Pro Solutions to help to protect everyone. Over 130 years of dedication to fighting germs came together over 10 days to ensure that instead of worrying about the 4,800 chairs, 180 lift buttons, 2,000 door handles, 1,400 toilet seats, or the 180 lapel microphones, they could focus on the one big job at hand. Our Pro Solutions program helps businesses protect people, allowing them to thrive. At COP26, we did this with a dedicated hygiene team, scientific protocols, and a wide range of products. But that's only half the story.
Working together with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine,
we identify hundreds of high-risk hotspots,
helping us create 13 hygiene protocols.
Delivering thousands of interventions every hour proven to kill germs.
And this all came together to help make everyone feel safe. With Lysol Pro Solutions, we mean business, no matter the business. And having successfully run our program to help protect 30,000 people at COP26, we're confident we can do the same for your business more effectively than ever. Lysol Pro Solutions, a trusted standard for protection.
Amazing. So COP26, it's definitely no small feat. I guess let's start there. What were the key challenges in delivering a safe and, importantly, a successful COP26?
Yeah, and I think, Julian, you opened it up nicely at the beginning that obviously COP was one of the largest in-person events in the UK since the pandemic, right? So, and really also one of the most high-profile. I think Susan can talk to that. So I think it mentioned there 30,000. I think even more than 30,000 were in attendance in the end. So not just the largest event since the start of the pandemic, but the largest COP ever, actually. So I know, Susan, you want to kind of touch on that, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a Herculean feat. So I think the stating the obvious, but I think a really important point to make is we were trying to deliver this event in an unknown environment. Everything was changing. It was a completely uncertain time for everyone, both personal and professional, as well as kind of conference and event space. Ever changing. It felt like every day there was something new to think about. And at times leading up to the conference, it did feel, I'm sure for people on this call as well, quite volatile. So I think we needed to make sure that people would feel confidence about attending this, and that included world leaders as well as delegates and the wider community within Scotland, because it was based kind of in a thriving city. It was an extremely complex event as well. It was UN owned, local government involvement, UK government involvement, health policy is Scotland specific. So we were trying to balance all of those different approaches to COVID, again, to try and make sure that we could deliver the safest conference possible with attendees coming from all over the world.
And it was so huge. It was the size of 30 football pitches with many structures, meeting rooms, and event spaces. And what we had to do was take a very sort of scientific and risk-based approach so that we could actually make sure that we covered all angles. But also we had to be aware that it was such a huge thing, it could get out of control. So it was very important for us to take that sort of scientific approach, to think about not just the microbiology, but also the behavioral science. What were people actually going to do in those spaces?
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have all been involved in events, perhaps definitely not of this scale before, but what was the difference when it came to COP26? What was the difference in the approach to standard cleaning measures that you'd use in other events? How did that change because of the scale of COP26, but also at the time that it was happening in the middle of a global pandemic?
Well, we're focusing on targeted hygiene. The principles of targeted hygiene is that you clean and you disinfect and take hygiene interventions where it's really needed, rather than just spraying indiscriminately everywhere. And that is actually the Reckitt approach. But of course, for in other events, that has not been the case. Not what we have done. This is the way that we would approach this. But other events have tended to sort of go rather wholesale on the spraying. What we wanted to do was focus on the exact places where we really did need to make sure there was disinfection, because sometimes if you don't do that, you can actually miss the very things that are most likely to transmit viruses or bacteria. And we did this by using a scientific approach. So we actually scoured the scientific evidence to determine which high touch surfaces were the ones that we needed to focus on.
And from a COP26 COVID-19 policy perspective, the cleaning measures were put under even closer scrutiny because it was one piece of what we like to think of as a wider puzzle. It was one element of a package of COVID-19 mitigation measures to safeguard attendees as far as possible. So we had things like testing as well, but hygiene was really, really key as people spent so much time at the venue itself. Stakeholders like Public Health Scotland wanted to know what the high touch points were. They wanted to know that detail, even down to the point of where are the hand sanitizer stations placed across the venue, and kind of doing a sweep through in that way. So it was an entirely new level of detail and focus on something that previously wouldn't have been potentially discussed in such a kind of wide-ranging forum. It wasn't seen as a kind of tick the box. The cleaning needed to be thorough, it needed to be trusted, and we needed to be able to show that we were taking this quite seriously to safeguard attendees.
And obviously, we saw that we had over 30,000 people attending. How were delegates encouraged to support the hygiene measures? What kind of education did you provide to them on site, especially as that would probably be the first time they were at an event of that scale with hygiene protocols of that intensity?
Well, one of the things that we did was we provided every delegate with a hygiene kit. So this was immediately obvious to them that we meant business. In the hygiene kit, there was messaging to inform with tips about hygiene procedures that everybody could follow. And there was also a COP26 branded face covering in the pack, some personal hand sanitizer and some wipes that they could use personally. And this element of self-care, it really helped to drive the hygiene behaviours. And it was supplemented by the messaging in the box, but also messaging around on the hand sanitizers and generally around the event.
Yeah, and I think a really important thing from the kind of policy perspective was signage. It was key to reinforce the message on the enhanced hygiene standards. We thought really carefully about this. We thought really carefully about the phrasing. So what we had were tent cards for every tables and in workspaces, as well as totems throughout the venue. So we needed to really hammer home the importance of this. Even, when we were considering it, English wasn't everyone's first language. People are coming from all over the world. So how do we kind of consider language barriers, but also emphasize the importance of this? We also provided a very detailed question and answer that was provided on the website to make sure that everyone knew when to wear face covering, all the way down to what cleaning would go on at the venue again. So I think another huge element was the visibility and number of hand sanitizer stations. That was huge in promoting the continued use and continued hand hygiene throughout the day. So it was something that built into people's schedule. You saw people going by and using the hand sanitizer stations, just stopping conversations, using them and continuing onward. So it really became part of habit. And, you know, this all allowed us to, you know, help the negotiators and the attendees get on with their work. They had the visible action of hygiene, even down to cleaning security trays. So it just allowed everyone to focus on negotiations, because it is a key climate change conference.
Yeah, and then if we look at the effectiveness of these hygiene protocols at COP26, you know, what were the findings? What was the result? How successful was it?
One of the things that we did to provide reassurance about compliance, to make sure that everyone was secure in the knowledge that the protocols were actually working, is we deployed a team of environmental health officers, local people that we recruited, to actually take ATP tests, and they actually tested the surfaces immediately after cleaning so that we could be sure that the agreed standard had been reached. And this was cloud-based, so the results, so it meant that we could actually see immediately what the results were, and then we could feed that back in a dashboard to the government so that they could feel reassured at the end of the day. They could see what results we'd achieved. And I think from everybody's point of view, that gave quite a high degree of confidence.
Yeah, and from a kind of government perspective, so throughout the process, we engaged with Scotland's Chief Medical Officer on a weekly basis. So for our Americans on the call, that would be the equivalent of Fauci. This was someone who was extremely interested in the success of the conference from a public health perspective. So we had our Chief Medical Officer come and do a walk around of the venue, and he noted the high adherence. He was extremely impressed with all the hygiene products available, with the way that people could kind of keep that going as a routine. As our head clinician said the same thing. It even got to a point where attendees and one of the VIP guests tweeted about the cleaning, saying that it was the unsung heroes for the cleaners. So it just goes to show that visibility and creating that confidence that people can then focus on, you know, what the job at hand. And then speaking from a data perspective, based on a Public Health Scotland report completed after the conference, which is available online if people do want to see it. 4 in 1,000 cases were linked to the conference, and that is significantly lower than the local COVID positive case rate within the wider Scottish community. So it was extremely successful.
Yeah, I agree, Susan. I mean, not just to get, you know, I think obviously everyone was worried that it could have been, let's say, higher than the local average. So to get a result where it was significantly below the local average was a real kind of testament, I think, to the overall efficacy, and let's say of the overall COVID mitigations, but also the hygiene strategy that was put in place around COP.
Yeah, you know an event is good when people are tweeting about cleaning, right? That's, you know, you've made a mark when you tweet about cleaning. How much planning, like in terms of the time, in terms of how long you had to plan this cleaning protocol, Susan? How long did that take? How many months of planning went into this?
Well, I think I'm going to shock people. This was 1.5 years in the making, but we really, we really had to work closely with our partners at Reckitt very intensely for the last 6 months. So this was daily working together. I had a full team behind me focusing on this as well. So we had a team of 6. This was dedicated resource, as well as kind of going through with iterations, and I'm sure Stuart can kind of attest to that, as can Lisa.
And I think, as Lisa touched on, you know, we really had to take into account how dynamic the space was. So we really had this huge range of types of locations, you know, from kind of some areas more equivalent to a large, let's say, arena, to some that are much closer to a kind of office space. So there was a huge amount of, you know, it's a working space, huge amount of hot desking, meetings, so many different meeting rooms, small offices for all the different countries that were present. And so we really needed a very specific strategy for each of those different types of spaces. So, if we give example of the hot desking space, which was really dynamic, so there was people moving in and out of the space, we executed a strategy of having a roaming member of staff that really was covering a huge number of desks, but looking there for that changeover kind of event where then they could initiate and I say disinfect the specific hotspots on that desk before then somebody else would go in and use it. And also we did a huge amount of planning into which were the hand hygiene locations needed. So I think Susan touched on the number of hand sanitizers present. Also the location of them were really, really important in those high traffic, high usage areas that meant that people were using them, again, supported with the kind of messaging from that standpoint.
So if we switch gears a little bit and just, I guess, drill a bit into the idea of targeted hygiene approach, Lisa, can you just explain to us what a targeted hygiene approach means?
Right, thank you. Well, it's very simple. It's basically using hygiene at the places and the times when it's most needed. So it's not just a matter of focusing on hotspots or high touch points. It's actually looking at the whole thing in terms of how the spaces are used and how frequently you actually need to disinfect and when you need to disinfect. So I could give you one example. For example, if you said that you need to clean your hands, wash your hands frequently, that wouldn't really tell you the times which are most important for washing your hands. So targeted hygiene actually looks at when will the intervention actually make the most difference. And so instead of washing your hands all day long, you wash your hands at the periods when it really does matter. So for example, after using the bathroom, when arriving at your destination, when going into some hospitality, when you're going to eat with your fingers, and these are called key moments. And these key moments are when the interventions will be most effective. The great thing about targeted hygiene is that it's more sustainable because you're actually cleaning and disinfecting when you really need to do it, rather than just using a lot of chemical in all sorts of places where it really isn't needed quite so much. So it's a little bit more of a scientific approach, and we feel that it's more effective, it's more cost effective, and it's also more sustainable.
And how is it more effective when it comes to the workplace? How is it different from other methods of cleaning the workplace? How is this targeted hygiene approach more effective and, I guess, better than other approaches being implemented today?
Well, what you might find in many workplaces or many businesses is that the cleaning might take place just at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. Whereas targeted hygiene actually looks at the use of the space. And there might be certain times of the day when you actually need to do a little bit more cleaning and times of the day when you don't have to, because it depends on the use of the building, how many people are there. And so take for example, a hot desk. If you were hot desking, if somebody was going on a number of occasions to the same desk over a day, cleaning just at the end of the day wouldn't actually help the users in the middle of the day who are crossing over. But if you actually intervene by, for example, I'm a great believer in sort of self-care as well. If you provide wipes, for example, for people at a desk, then they can wipe the desk down as they sit down. They could wipe the desk down as a courtesy when they leave. And that means that you've actually got more effective hygiene going on than just simply cleaning at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that consumer controlled hygiene, Lisa, is a really important incremental factor, right? Where ensures or puts control in the hands of the employees in this case within an office, and allows it to ensure then it's used at the right moment, rather than waiting, as Lisa's saying, of periodic deep cleaning, which we know is a strategy often deployed, but isn't one that's proven to be as effective as targeted hygiene. I think there's an interesting study on this in office places in the Journal of Occupational and and environmental hygiene, where they looked at this in an office place, and they showed that with an implementation of a targeted hygiene program, they saw a 77% reduction in the risk of certain types of infections, of rhinovirus, rotavirus kinds of infections in an office setting, which shows that the kind of data and science supporting the usage of this kind of approach in those kind of settings.
And of course, it's really important to think about this in terms of all infections. I mean, what we're trying to do here is break the chain of infection. And there are so many infections apart from COVID. I mean, that's what we're all focusing on at the moment. But there are many other types of infections that spread around offices and cause absenteeism. And by breaking the chain of the infection and targeting this hygiene at the key moments to do that, then we're actually helping to reduce the risks of transmission of all sorts of infectious diseases.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to an office environment, and to your point, Lisa, about self-care, it's so important for there to be transparent communication with employees on understanding what the protocols are and then implementing them if they have to in the case of self-care. Stuart, like, what signage and other methods can businesses leverage to make sure that they're communicating to the staff and employees on what the hygiene protocols are in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a great question, Julian. The hygiene, hygiene communication is a really important part of the overall hygiene strategy and a holistic hygiene program in a facility. And by improving hygienic behavior, so using messaging and communication to improve hygiene behaviors, such as hand hygiene, but also the usage of specific surface hygiene in target areas, can really improve the health outcomes in a space. So we've worked quite closely with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and their behavioral science experts who've advised us on effective hygiene communication strategies. And really, they came through with these kind of 4 key principles around behavioral science and how that can link with effective hygiene communication. So first of that was that you need to target a motivational theme. In the example of COP26, we really used that communal sense of really of climate change, of how we of a group getting together to solve a really big problem, and tied our messaging and communication around that. There's really an aspect of trying to make communication surprising. So can you place communication in those areas that really catch people's attention? And then the other parts are, about making behaviors convenient and hard to avoid. So that comes to communication around, can we put the signage in areas where it's on the door of the entry to the bathroom, it's on the back of the let's say door of a stall, and some of those kind of areas that make it hard to avoid, and then really with an overall aim of making behaviors normative and socially desirable and even rewarding, right? Can you get a collective buy-in that would allow the improvement in behaviors, which then we know links to improved outcomes from a messaging standpoint. So I think the overall, for me, message would be that it should be science-based and really with an intent to support more hygienic behaviors. And the additional outcome of that is you also get that improvement in employee confidence.
Yeah. And I guess we're 2 years or more than 2 years into this pandemic, and years into the development of these hygiene protocols. Stuart, do you see these with some of the businesses you work with? Do you see employees are they starting to buy into hygiene protocols? Is it second nature now, or is there still some resistance? How easy is it from your experience for the average employee to really just understand why targeted protocols are needed and appropriate?
I think there's, for me, we see a variety of approaches, right? I think our key approach from a Reckitt perspective is that it needs to be science-based, right? That's the starting point that I think Lisa highlighted. For us, based around the science of targeted hygiene, it needs to be easily understood, both by the cleaning staff and by those within a space. So, linking to that communication we talked about. But I think for me, it needs to then, with a layer of depth in terms of design and science that sits behind it. So I think it's really the important thing for businesses to need to understand is have a program that can be communicated simply, but that has a layer of detail and design around it that makes a difference. And I think that for me is key. I don't know, Lisa, what your thoughts are as well.
Yeah, I'll agree totally. The other thing I'd think about as well is the hand sanitizer and is the soap you're using actually nice to use? Because that's really important. I mean, how many times, and also is it kept stocked up? How many times have people gone to an event and then they put their hands, they actually touch the dispenser and it's empty. And you've got this like, oh my goodness, I've now touched a really dirty dispenser and it's empty and now I've got dirty hands and I can't even get sanitizer out. So I think, it all layers up to something that builds confidence and it makes the employees feel that they are being looked after and they are being respected. They're given something that isn't unpleasant to use. And that helps to build that confidence. It helps to actually build the compliance. Because if you don't like the products, then it's possible that people won't use them for that reason.
Yeah, that's such an important point. So just going back to COP26 a bit, I know you touched upon it before, Stuart, but what protocols were put in place for the office-like environments at the conference? How did that work? And how did the targeted hygiene approach work in the office environments within the wider COP26 conference?
Well, we were applying the principles to any of the areas. We identified that there were 12 different types of location. And so we were applying those principles to each one of those. So for example, in a meeting room, which would be typical of an office environment, then we were in between meetings, we were sending in the cleaning teams so that they could follow the protocol and disinfect the high touch points in those meeting rooms. And we had to work out how long this was going to take, because obviously we didn't want cleaning to take more time than the event itself. So, it was all very, very carefully orchestrated so that the meetings would finish in enough time to allow for the cleaning and disinfection to take place. And in addition, in the areas where people were hot desking, then as Stuart mentioned, we had the roaming cleaners who could go in between uses so that they could then disinfect the surfaces where someone else was going to come and sit.
Yeah, and I think to add from that, from a kind of COVID policy perspective, providing the wipes was also very helpful for people because it gave them control to determine what hygienic space was like for them. So, they could bring that to their hot desk. So as Stuart said, a lot of people moving around, a lot of movement, a very energetic environment. By giving that to people, they could feel that confidence as well. And I think that was really, really important. Another thing, and Lisa went into this, was kind of cleaning between meetings. It's a very enclosed space. You have people from all over the world. It's very important. You want to be involved with it. How do you get people comfortable to go into those enclosed spaces? And I think the very detailed hygiene measures and the visibility of it helped people go into that. Even I think the attention to detail was really helpful. So going down to the level of cleaning microphones. We did that as well, as you saw in the video entry. So it really helped people participate in the event and feel that confidence.
I wonder if you could talk about, Lisa, if you could talk about the importance of training, cleaning and disinfecting staff, both for a conference like COP26, but also in businesses large and small. How important is ensuring that the cleaning and disinfectant staff are aware of the complexity and the importance of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important point. And obviously, when we end up distilling all this science and the risk assessment that we've carried out, it comes down to a sheet of paper for every protocol, you know, and you might think that that's really quite simple, and it is, because the end user needs to see the simplicity, and because that's exactly what they need to do their job. But behind that, for the cleaning managers, we set about getting a qualification for them if they wanted to take it with the Royal Institute of Environmental Health Institute of Scotland on cleaning and disinfection, so that they were then able to cascade the training to their staff. So they had a higher level of understanding, and we provided the materials so that they could then cascade that training to the staff, because it's absolutely key. You can't have a protocol without people knowing what to do with it. And of course, following on from that, then we had the compliance testing as well, which is also really important. So we saw this, you know, the providing the protocol and the products was not the end of this at all. We needed to follow it all the way through so that we could get a successful outcome.
Absolutely. Stuart, how have employees' expectations from their employers? How has that changed, especially around hygiene? Obviously, as I said, we're years into the pandemic. There's a different level of engagement and expectation that a lot of workers, especially hybrid and remote workers, have with their employees. How has that changed, and how do you think that's going to evolve further?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's something we're obviously intently interested in. So we, as a Lysol Pro Solutions team, we conducted an insight study on that with about 1,000 American office workers, and the output of it is, I think, insightful. So that for me, the positive part of it is there was a lot of positive feedback around return to the office. I think, and I would kind of second that myself as somebody who's been working from home, but as also a young family around, is that need to also have that workspace and return to the office is an important part of work, and 77% of people were kind of positive about that, which I think is really great. But there's also a lot of learnings relevant from a hygiene standpoint. So the vast majority, 87% felt some anxiety about physical meeting in confined spaces like meeting rooms. And even as much as 28% of people avoiding communal areas altogether. So 28% of people that really don't feel comfortable in any of those areas where people are gathering. And then, and as Lisa mentioned, beyond COVID, there's a real increase in people's concern about catching other illnesses like cold and flu in the office now than what they were before the pandemic. And I think that's left employees reflecting on and thinking much more so that now than ever before about what programs that employers have in place and how they feel about it. So the survey, and it was shared in the press release, only around 32% felt that their company's health and safety measures were excellent. So we can conclude from that the vast majority did not, and more than half, or around half, let's say, believe that the hygiene protocols could be better enforced in an office, and only 25% that see any sort of cleaning and disinfection that happen multiple times per day, linked to what Lisa was mentioning from a target hygiene perspective. And I think with what you mentioned, there's been a lot of reporting and an increase in hot desking environments, right? So I was reading a Deloitte report that was looking at multinational companies that highlighted that around 75% had either implemented or were planning to implement hot desking. And really this big evolution, I can say that from my own perspective, I no longer have a desk. I have an office that I can go to. I can book a desk, but my own desk now I don't have. And I think there's a lot of companies that are making that kind of change. And that also brings new behaviors needed from a hygiene standpoint. And we see that in the feedback. So there's a huge increase in the desire for what we kind of call consumer controlled hygiene, or the ability for people to take aspects of hygiene into their own hands. And we saw that, 58% of employees wanted their employer to provide some kinds of hygiene products, disinfection products, like either wipes or sprays, to enable them to help support their hygiene in a workplace. And I think that's indicative, I think, of some of the evolution that we're seeing regarding people's thoughts around attending to work. And I think for me, it kind of reinforces the need for a comprehensive targeted hygiene program, both in terms of ensuring the right health outcomes, but also ensuring the right confidence in employees with their employers.
Thank you. Right, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'll just have a final question for the group, and then we'll tackle some of the questions that have come in the Q&A. So yeah, what advice would you give to employers and building service contractors as they approach the return to employees in the office on a wide scale? If I can start with you, Lisa.
Well, I think the thing is to have a plan, to work out what you need to do, where you need to do it. Where do you need to put your hand sanitizers, for example? What sort of hand sanitizer would be best suited in your reception area, for example? Work out the flow of what people do in the building. And I like to call it the journey of the germ, really. You know, what happens where could it go? Where could the germs go in the building? And how do people transport them? How can we actually implement a plan that will, it really has had a risk assessment behind it, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. So even in the smallest of offices, you could have the hand sanitizer at the start, and you could have a pack of wipes so that people could use them for the desks, and then obviously make sure that you've got soap in the washrooms. So it doesn't have to be very, very difficult, but it's just a sort of methodical plan. And I would say what's really important as well is if you have invested in that, communicate it to your workforce so that they know, they can come back with confidence, knowing that you care about them and that you've put these measures in place, and also tell them what's expected of them. You know, are they supposed to be wearing face coverings? Are they supposed to be hand sanitizing when they arrive, and why? And that you've got these wipes, for example, for them to wipe their desk areas when they arrive and when they leave.
Yeah, and I think, Lisa, that's really well framed, right? For me, it's how do you nurture a kind of culture of care, and using also hygiene to show that and restore employee confidence in the office space. I think, you know, that aspect of it being ensuring that it's science-based, so ensure that it's targeted, and I think it's, you know, by that we mean, you know, ensure it's specific, it's timely, it's effective and efficient. And then for me, of the kind of final bit would be that you can then consider whether you reach out and contact a hygiene expert. So do you want to then use and leverage expertise like what we have at Lysol Pro Solutions to help support designing that and putting it into place?
Yeah, and I think based on my experience from COP26 specifically, you really have to convey the objective of the hygiene measures. And when people understand why the measures are in place, you get the buy-in. So specifically in this, in kind of the instance for such a large event, we didn't need just buy-in from the attendees. That was obviously vital, but before that, we needed agreement from the Prime Minister, the First Minister of Scotland, the Chief Medical Officer of Scotland, the Chief Medical Officer of England. So we needed everybody on board. So when I say explain the objective and get the buy-in, it's everyone, because you need to have consistency. And that would be another thing that would take away. It was that constant cleaning. It was that constant reinforcement of messaging, hand sanitizer stations across the venue, also having the hygiene packs. And it's just important to keep in mind people interpret what a public health safe space is differently now. We never talked about cleaning products before in a much, you know, wider forum, as I had alluded to before, but now people know what products are being used. You know, you go and you look at what cleaning is going to be enacted when when you do go someplace. So you really need to think about how the mentality of the public has changed. And I think that's especially important in an office when you continually attend the same place. So I think it's just really getting that confidence, getting that understanding, and getting everyone on the same page to get to your final objective of safeguarding the public health of, you know, in my experience, the COP26 attendees, world leaders even, but then in kind of, and thinking about it in this forum, kind of your office employees.
Thank you. Cool. So let's go to Q&As for the last 15 minutes. There are a few on residual cleaning products. So I'll direct those to you, Stuart. The first one, just if I read it all out, disinfection is typically a point-in-time solution, meaning that it kills pathogens when it's done. So perhaps over a 5-minute window, but then the next time someone walks and touches the surface, it's recontaminated. Even in major hospitals, they're disinfecting 7 to 8 times a day. How does Reckitt view the opportunity to provide continuous or residual disinfection for hard surfaces that protects 24/7? Is there any new innovation in this regard? And if so, how long before it's available on the market? And then just a bolt on to that, there was a question on if residual and long-lasting supplemental disinfectant antimicrobial products were used as part of the COP26.
Right, yeah. So and that I can answer. And we, for COP26, we didn't employ any specific residual products. I think, you know, obviously I can't kind of let's say speak to the and divulge the innovations that we're working on internally. I think the thing that I'd say around residual disinfection, without kind of going into territories that I can't speak about, is at Reckitt and at Lysol, we look at that space ensuring that it's really science-based, right? So it has to be, anything that we do at Lysol, we have a proven trust as a brand around the efficacy of our products, and it's something that we take really, really seriously. You know, and we have more than 100 years, you know, it's I think now 130 years of kind of trusted protection, right? So anything that we do within that residual space would need to be of the highest efficacy and proven efficacy to work as what we say to our customers in the pro space and consumers in the retail space. And I think that's where I would advise any business out there to really carefully review and understand any kind of residual products before that's what they choose to employ. I'll say it like that, because I think we certainly from a Reckitt standpoint see a wide variety of products in that space, a wide variety of claims in that space. I think I think some of which you could say whether, or you know, there are certainly questions within a public setting for sure whether they would be completely science-based. That's maybe how I can frame it appropriately. So I think it's obviously something that we look at. I think, and Lisa, maybe you can also touch on it. Obviously, the other aspect of this that we study very much is the buildup of fomites on a surface over time. So this aspect, and I think this is where the target hygiene is important, is that there's a big, let's say, build-up standpoint, risk standpoint that comes with that. There's a soil aspect that also comes in with the usage of products. So, you know, the aspect where you've got both cleaning and disinfection that's taking place. So that's also an important part that comes into it. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to add anything from that standpoint.
So Lisa, you're on mute still.
I'm doing it. The other thing to bear in mind is that, yes, of course, I've seen some of the questions, you know, and it's sort of saying, well, you might have cleaned it, and then obviously 5 minutes later, someone walks around and they're making a surface dirty again. But part of this is actually reducing the risk rather than getting to a zero situation. And you just can't eliminate the risk altogether. But what you can do as well is this a combination. So targeted hygiene isn't just about surface disinfection. It's about actually engaging people in hand hygiene as well. Because at the end of the day, the route of infection from a surface to a hand, to the face, to the eyes, that's the route of infection. It doesn't leap off the surface and grab you. So what we actually need to do is combine the things together, and it's the end user that needs to also protect themselves by their hand hygiene, and that's why the messaging is so important. So that we know that people touch their faces on average around 23 times an hour. So there's a really good chance that if you've got contaminated fingers, that you are going to get a virus in your eye, and you know that's something we need to protect against. So I think it's very important to see this as a whole. It's not just surface disinfection. Our approach is surface and hygiene as well.
Then James Smith asks, this is for you, Lisa. The use of disinfection technology has really spiked with the COVID pandemic, and consumer behavior has changed significantly with regard to how they view and manage hygiene. As the concern of the pandemic begins to diminish, do you see a significant shift in the norm for the use of disinfectants going forward, or do you think it will revert back to previous levels?
I think we'll never go back to previous levels, because I think there is a raised awareness now in the population and in employers, where we never before had such an interest in hygiene. I mean, to be quite frank, you know, as an environmental health practitioner, it's quite shocking how little some people used to clean. And now we have these expectations from the public, from the workforce and enforcement agencies for a much higher standard than ever before, and a greater understanding of the risk and the route of transmission of infectious diseases. And that's really where I come from, that hygiene is at the root of preventing infectious diseases. And I can't see us going back, but there is the threat of people getting fed up with COVID, getting fed up with hygiene, and we need to make sure that we stamp on that and really raise awareness of this incredible power that we have for a very small amount of money, actually, to help ourselves to a healthier existence. And one of the things I just want to mention is part of targeted hygiene. One of the themes behind that is that by reducing the risks of infection, by reducing infections, one of the things that we're helping to do is reduce the amount of antibiotics that people might have to use because they've got an infection. And this is really important going forwards for the future, because you know, antibiotic resistance is something that we really need to try to control, and World Health Organization sees this as a big threat to mankind. So I think this is all part and parcel of it. It's a very, very simple intervention, actually, and very cost-effective intervention, and it has you know, amazing knock-on effects.
And just a question from James Smith on COP26, again for you, Lisa, was he was just wondering what, did you look at air filtration, and how did you clean or remove pathogens from the air via air filters or ventilation systems? And if so, can you comment on the approach around this?
That wasn't part of our remit, Julian. Maybe Susan, have you got anything you can add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I would just say that ventilation was a key point of it as well, and that was definitely something that we kept in mind. And we also encouraged use of face covering, so that also helped moving throughout the venue. But there was air ventilation systems in place at the time, especially because one of the parts of the venue had been turned into an emergency response hospital. So part of the venue did have hospital grade ventilation in place already due to previous use.
Fantastic. There's a question here, Susan. I'm not sure if it's one you'd like to answer, but the question from James Smith: Is there any work being done to take these concepts in targeted hygiene that have been developed and extending that to healthcare facilities throughout the UK? to help reduce nosocomial diseases? If so, has there been any measured improvements in the results so far?
Yeah, so I won't speak on behalf of Department for Health and Social Care, but what I can say is that there has been a lot of lessons learned captured, and government departments are really keen to know how we held such a successful COP26 in autumn during a pandemic with over 30,000 people. So when you think about that, that is absolutely staggering numbers for the success rate. So government is very keen to capture all the things that went well and how to apply them to future events as well, because you know, as Lisa's been alluding to, this won't be the last time that people will want to focus on hygiene and public health safety. So yeah, that's what I would say from the kind of COP26 event perspective.
There's a question here, I'll just read it out. With the growing global concern on antimicrobial resistance caused by overuse of antibiotics, biocides, and ingredients that provide bacteria or fungi to adapt, given the veracity of the hyper-clean indoor environments, a lot of words. How can we prioritize approaches with current state-of-the-art research outcomes on microbes that can't be grown in a lab in order to influence public health guidelines? Don't know who would be best. Is it one for you, Stuart, or Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Lisa, if you want to touch on it. It's a very, when we're talking about it, it says microbes that can't be grown in a lab, which I don't know if they have something specific there in mind that they're referencing there.
I'm afraid I don't really understand the question.
Yeah, I think if we talk about AMR, I think, you know, antimicrobial resistance, obviously, or antibiotic resistance, something that is a key challenge. You know, I think it's been highlighted by the CDC as one of the top health challenges. And I think to us, effective disinfection and effective usage of and targeted usage, I think, as Lisa's talked about, so you know, not the indiscriminate use of chemical, indiscriminate application of chemical is really in support of that. I think that from our standpoint, that we using products responsibly, as per the label, in the right places and right times, can actually help support that effort rather than detract from it.
In addition, I mean, the question reflected on hyperclean environments, and the whole point of targeted hygiene is to target at the areas where you really need to target, and you can leave the other organisms, the ones that may be what's called in the trade the old friends, the good bacteria, and you can leave those alone, because you're actually just targeting at the surfaces where there might be transmission of infectious diseases. So you're not creating a sterile environment. You're not depleting people's accessibility to microorganisms that might be helpful. And I think that's quite an important point. And I mean, of course, we can't see whether something's dangerous, or you know, whether a surface has dangerous bacteria or viruses on or not. But what we can do is say the surfaces that we touch we can deal with, and maybe other surfaces which are not so important can be left alone. Whereas if you're using indiscriminate spraying, then you're basically wiping out everything, and that perhaps is potentially more dangerous. So I mean, it's very much a case of let's live alongside the good microorganisms, but let's, you know, make sure that we reduce as much as we can those in the circumstances where we can make a difference. So for example, on the high touch points.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's about all we have time for. So thank you very much, Lisa, Stuart, and Susan. This was fantastic. I learned a lot. Journey of the Germ is a horror film that I'd absolutely watch. And for those of you who want to learn how Lysol Pro Solutions can help protect workers in the office, I will just flash on the screen right now just some information that could help. LysolProSolutions.com, and there's an email address there and a telephone number as well, so take a screenshot or write it down. But thank you so much for attending. Thank you for all the amazing questions. Hope you learned a lot. I certainly did. And yeah, thanks to the panelists again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.